everyone. Welcome to another amazing webinar brought to you by Functional Training Institute and Rehab Trainer. So you can see my fellow colleagues, Ulrik, if you want to give a wave or a shout, whatever, both, and Timbo. And Tim presents for Functional Training Institute and also represents Rehab Trainer. So we've had Tim with us on the team for many years now, and Tim is a sublime example of someone who has embodied the MRC content, material, and he's a living, breathing example. And you will learn more about Tim and what he does, as well as Ulrik. So really this webinar, folks, is not simply just information about MRC. We're going to dive into some philosophical underpinnings of the program, that essentially Ulrik and I masterminded about 3 years ago, and Ulrik will talk about his approach, and then I'll layer in some of mine. But we want to give you guys some firm strategies as well, so that we'll have folks, as you're coming in, please mute. So we'll give you firm strategies, and I'll have Tim certainly share some perspectives, some strategies for you. Finally, I will, kind of lay out the foundations of the program, how it works, and how it can be transformative for you as a coach and for your clients as well. So without further ado, I'm going to share screen so you guys get a bit of a perspective of our model. So the MRC we regard is a pillar of injury prevention, and the concept here is driven by this idea of assess, correct, and retrain, which we'll go into and dive into more detail in a moment. And the methodology here is that if we've got movement preparation feeding into this progressive movement system, we also will include recovery protocols, and that really encompasses the movement restoration coach as a program, but also as a methodology, and certainly the philosophical underpinnings are important. So to that end, Ulrik, I'm going to get you to talk more on the philosophical underpinnings of the movement restoration and what it means to become an MRC coach.
Okay, wow. It's movement restoration, you could say, is something that is the essence of injury prevention and injury management. And we've been doing this, sort of blending the physiotherapy world and the fitness world, or the functional training world, together into what we call rehab training for good sort of 17 years. And as I got to know Tarek and the Functional Training Institute developed about 10 years ago, we've kind of grown together and then seen a lot of these concepts in mesh. And then really it was COVID and a few other sort of positive, negative elements that just grew into movement restoration coaching as the kind of the fullness of rehab trainer and functional training, right? So movement restoration, I suppose, assumes the idea that movement was lost. And that is a bit controversial, I would say. I would say that not everybody will agree with us, and research is hard to pin down on any of this material, but you may well find research to back up both sides of a case for, can movement be lost? From me, in my experience, 30 years as a sports physiotherapist, I would say unequivocally movements can be lost. And what I mean by that is, let's say just something as simple as bending efficiently and bending to do jobs of daily life, or bending to squat, to deadlift, whatsoever. Many people lose a certain method of bending that gradually forms, or becomes a part of why they get chronic lower back pain. So what we see is that many people with chronic lower back pain find it very hard to do a nice, clean deadlift, right? That's a classic thing that physiotherapists everywhere note with people who have chronic lower back pain. So it's no big stretch to make the example, the legitimate example, that the movement of sweet hip hinging, where the lordosis is maintained in the bending movement, that movement actually gets lost very easily. Now you might discuss why. Why do people lose the ability to bend at the hip, keeping the lumbar spine, nice and neutral in the lordosis? You can debate that. Probably it's because we sit so much. Probably it's because we get, any number of even psychological factors will pull us into more flexion. Anyway, so why is another matter. But the bottom line is that I really do believe that movements are lost, and then movements need to be retrained, reintegrated. And that's no small matter. That is not an easy thing to achieve for clients who are in discomfort, who are in pain, but also for coaches or for personal trainers or fitness professionals. It's not easy, right? This is a challenging, intellectually stimulating, very worthwhile game that we're looking at here, the world of injury prevention. So I don't know if that's enough, a bit of a preamble there to say simply that movements, I believe, do get lost in the process of life, and especially with aches and pains or acute injury, certain movements do become lost and need to be retrained into the healthy human system. So we have a big variety of movements that the brain can use for normal living. All right. If we don't get that back, we may never relearn those movements.
Going further along from what Ulrik explained there in the philosophical underpinnings, I've got another slide here which shows the breadth and depth of the movement restoration coach program. So, and I'll get Tim to kind of sort of expand on even Kevin very timely how this is applied in real life, right? As us as coaches. And the impact of these strategies in a moment. But you can see here, prep and recovery systems is our first level. Then we get into the assessment and corrective side, which we'll dive into a little bit more. And then the injury prevention systems, I'll get Ulrik to talk more of that. And so therefore, you've got this complete system that is fused with the best of the functional space with the world-class rehab protocol system that Ulrik created over 15 years ago now. And I was one of his students, I remember, like 9 years ago back in Sydney. So we've come a very long way. So Tim, I'll get you to come into this now and talk a little bit more about you as an educator, but you as a coach. You have an amazing facility there in Brisbane. So we'll get you to sort of maybe talk and expand on what Ulrik has talked about there in the philosophies of the program.
Yes, thanks, Tarek. Well, I guess I've been trying to specialize myself in this area for most of my career now, so over a decade. And I guess the prep and recovery section of this sort of highlights to me everything in and around, I guess, our traditional strength that we do. What I found in myself and a lot of coaches diving into this area is there's a lot of focus on, I guess, the hands-on approach. What, myofascial tool can I use? What release, what stretch, what activation? That's all really good. But most of the work, most of that injury prevention is in and around it. So we've got things like our warm-up. If we take an effective strategy towards our warm-up, injuries or compensations or the way we can direct someone's movement improvement can be done starting from that prep stage. And then also with that recovery is dealing with the stresses from that workout, all the life and everything around that. Having a good recovery sets our system up for, I guess, efficient and constant adaptation. Okay. But then also, coming into assessment, I think is absolutely vital, being very quick and on the mark with our coach's eye to not only have an initial assessment, seeing someone's entry point to fitness, but also assessing during an exercise setting. We may see something, if someone is stressed and they're under recovered, that may show up in the stress part of the work or in the work part as a dysfunctional movement just because they're stressed. And we've got the tools, the coach's eye to deal with that on the spot, which I think is an incredible tool and skill for us coaches to have. But then blending, I think one of the really key things this program is that injury prevention systems is blending that initial rehab. Someone does have a really difficult joint they're trying to deal with. How do we get them from that fundamental, I guess, rehab protocol phase back into performance where they want to be, that driving towards performance and a higher skill? There's just that we don't want such a big jump between very intense rehab and then, all right, let's drive to performance. What can we intervene with, or what can we intercept with that continues their rehab pathway, but then blends it straight into performance training? And what I've found to the Gen Pop, it doesn't look any different. There's not much to them. It doesn't look that much different between the rehab and performance. To them, it just looks like training, which is absolutely fantastic because it gives them the buy-in to what they came to you for, whatever, weight loss or a heavy squat or whatever they came to you for, but also able to deal with what they need, what limitations they have, without them getting so bored and frustrated with, you know, I can see you're trying to help my back here in the lordosis and that sort of thing, but this isn't going to help me lose 10 kilos. With this system, I have found that really alleviates a lot of that stress and that friction we have between what they want and what we need to give them.
Yeah, so it's an excellent point, Tim. When you said that in between, it's, and I'll get Ulrik to talk more on this, but we work within a scope of practice, and this is crucial. So Ulrik, I'll get you to talk more about that, because obviously there's end stage rehab, or being able to get into the performance realm, right? Whether that's a gym or the track and field. So from your experience, can you define the rehab protocol a little bit more, and sort of, I suppose, layer in your philosophies and way of delineating between what a trainer can do and what a physio, or in America we call the physical therapist, can do?
Yeah. Well, the sort of 5 key skills, or the sort of 5 pillars of rehab training, which kind of are spread throughout the movement restoration coach program, is easily kind of named by the R, E, H, A, and then the B letters. The risk assessment, which, you know, early on, even in your prep and your recovery, early assessment of clients' movements and so forth, there's a little bit of an eye to, you know, is there anything risky with how they're moving, with how they're feeling, with even their psychology, with their sleep, with their eating habits, or, you know, how much are they sitting? All these things are kind of subtle indicators of higher risk, lower risk for training and for movement towards performance. So risk assessment is blended throughout your conversations, and you're watching them move. How worried are they about certain movements? The brain certainly is central in all of this early stuff. If there's a lot of anxiety, a lot of concern, or what we call catastrophization around certain movements, then clients should be seen to be a little higher risk and more carefully progressed towards performance. Thankfully, the vast majority of clients do come up quite low risk, not only with the risk assessment protocol, but also the early assessments of the MRC. So then you move into an evaluation, RE, evaluation of movements, watching with the coach's eye, looking deeply into biomechanics and how people move, how they do the squat, all those kinds of things. All of these are kind of skills you slowly develop over the MRC. And then we've got our hands-on, as Tim was talking about. Hands-on really is attempting to loosen blockages or create desensitized fascia, kind of, or not create, but promote happy fascia, you know, more blood flow through fascia, less tightened up and maybe perhaps anxious fascia, if you want to use that kind of term. So movement is improved through hands-on techniques, myofascial rolling, trigger pointing, some stretching, passive, dynamic. All the rest of it is kind of the mobilization of the system to optimize movement later. And then we've got, Tim was talking about the retraining. We've got to find those movements that have dropped out and are not effectively being utilized in the brain, because the brain can't access certain movements. And they are pretty prescribed in our muscle imbalance sort of teaching. For example, for the lower limb, there's 6 classic muscle imbalances, and each of those speak to one little element of movement that the brain can't access as a common experience that we find, right? And then they tie into why a client might be more consistently injured and not able to get over their injuries. And then lastly, we're talking about blending. So risk assessment, evaluation of movement, hands-on, activation, retraining work, and then blending that into fitness programs, especially functional training fitness programs, of course, is the tricky bit as well, how to blend it and how to progress them gradually towards full strength. So that's the rehab system we've been trucking with. Hopefully that answers the question reasonably well. Tim, anything you want to throw in there about how you've been applying all those things? Is there one section that's easy, that you found easy to do, and one section you found that's hard to do?
Most of it, the hard stuff, is actually just around the communication towards the client.
Yeah.
So they love the blending, bit of activation work they love doing. Retraining stuff is quite good. It's compliance with, I guess, a lot of the stuff that they don't quite see links to their goals.
Yep.
That just comes to how you communicate to that person, and then how you sort of communicate what we're doing now, and how that indirectly, directly makes them achieve their goals. That's about it.
Yep.
And
In
that's
every sphere of movement restoration, whether that be right in a physio clinic or in a true gym context, the hardest part is compliance. Research even confirms this, that people are generally pretty demotivated with movement correction. So you really need all of your confidence. You need all of your little skills and tricks that you'd learn in the MRC. You need as much of it to kind of sometimes covertly get your clients to do it, or as Tim was saying, sneaky ways, like let's do lots of handstand stuff. What we're really doing, of course, is improving shoulder function and serratus anterior and yada, yada, right? So covert and sort of overt approaches to getting people to do their homework, right?
It's a great example, this idea of compliance, and especially testing it in the real world, like at the gym, right? So Tim, some other examples that may have worked. So for example, if the program is focusing on calisthenics, you're no doubt in a small group, for example, going to have potentially, let's say, or hypothetically, 2 to 3 who may be experiencing these injury prevention protocols. So what are some strategies there that are helpful? How you've communicated to allow them to blend into that program? Because that B stands for blending in, right? Or blending back into daily life, but blending back into these sessions rather than having them outside. I think that's another demotivating factor is if they're separated and all of a sudden they're doing rehab work, it's going to be very hard to stay compliant, and you may well even lose them as a client. So perhaps you can expand a little bit more on that subtlety, those nuances that you incorporate, Tim, for example.
Yes. Where do I start there? So it is quite interesting when coaches or even coaches in the Gen Pop look at the program I run here. I run a group training setting, and the big red flag that sort of pops up is the gymnastics that I run here, all the body weight stuff. And they're like, I come to you for this intervention. I've got a bum shoulder. What are you getting me to do handstands and ring work for? But it's just a way, one, it's enjoyment, it's fun, but you can structure it and regress it in a way that really fits in and ties in with a full body approach. Like a lot of what Ulrik mentioned with the muscle imbalances is really a joint by joint approach, and we're stacking, looking at the foot and the knee, the hip and the lower back, and it's really piece by piece. We've got to put something together, wraps that all together, right? And really it complements how we move as a human. And I really believe that there's a big merging point between dealing with that joint and the associated joints around that pain, and then getting them to move as a whole unit as one. And that's exactly how I explain it. It could be down to, how the brain's neuroplasticity works, to just how that joint incorporates in the whole body's movement. Here I was talking to my coaches just before about the transegrity model and how all that works together. So if we look at something like the transegrity model and how it integrates, I guess, to gymnastics and full body movement, that works really well when we're trying to blend a joint by joint rehab into the full body's function. So they don't necessarily have to consciously think so hard, like, where's my lower trap? Like it's if anyone's done that with a really inhibited lower trap, that could be so tricky and incredibly frustrating for me as well as the coach. Like it is pulling my hair out. But then if I can blend that really intense focus session into something that's fun that I don't have to think about, that lower trap is much easier to click on and just be used in an automatic just movement. And then within a year's time, all of a sudden, they don't really have to think so hard about where that lower trap is, because we've done that really intense rehab and then put it into something fun where that lower trap is kind of forced to be used. Right? You're not strong in that position as a full body movement unless that's engaged. So to achieve this skill, that rehab stuff has to work. I hope that answers that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's brilliant.
I'll add a point, gentlemen, and that is simply that I'm wondering if you would agree with me that different clients will respond to different approaches. Some who are the very excitable, dynamic, want to do everything, they will perhaps find it a lot harder to do the careful, the detailed, learning the exact muscle switch kind of movements that someone else who's perhaps a little more detailed in their brain and more sort of careful and introverted and sort of in that respect, perhaps more motivated to just do the little things, the little lower trap and learn that little switch. Even lower trap has a movement switch associated with it that most clients really don't have because of their hunch posture or because of their muscle imbalances or perhaps because they can't see it back there, right? So some clients will love just learning that little movement switch and doing that a good few times every day. So different clients will respond to different sort of methods, but also perhaps some more kinesthetically love a bit of rolling. Others perhaps more academic, love to understand some of the mechanics of it. So you're getting more and more options that will apply then and give you a cache of kind of modalities or skills for different clients. That really just improves your service, doesn't it?
It really does. And I think that's a terrific point there. Both Tim, thank you for laying out that engaging example, how you gamify it in a sense. Now, what's really intriguing here, guys, is that Tim's talked about integrating this in a group setting. And that to me is really significant because there's a lot of us coaches, trainers out there who don't just do one-on-one, right, clinical or otherwise, but there's also this group training. So I find that quite remarkable. And I want to expand on that around the talk, see, do method, Ulrik, and the 7 screens approach, because that was also designed for small group training. So can you talk a little bit more to the folks here about that?
Me?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so kind of, it was a few years after Tarek and I started working that we began to play a little more in the functional training space and the group space. And we were using kettlebells a bit more, weren't we, Tarek, and power bags and suspension trainers. And then we developed something called Rehab FX, which is part of the movement restoration coach. We've kind of condensed that to, a one-day kind of segment. And part of that is something we call injury prevention kit. So it's kind of a slightly different way of looking at this idea of preventing injury around having a great interview with clients. So being able to more effectively sort of highlight issues or understand the nature of a client's, body movement at that point in time. So an interview is what we call the talk component, having a more effective talk, more effective interview, learning, knowing what you need to learn and sort of pull out of these conversations rather than just a ramble that you kind of, what do I do with all that info? You want to know what you're looking for. Secondly, then, we've kind of come up with 7 classic bad habits of movement. Now, again, that needs to be perhaps clarified that each of these movements, you could argue, are probably a normal part of movement. But if that's the only way a client can move, let's say a medial knee deviation on a lunge, that in itself may or may not be a truly harmful thing unless the client cannot auto-correct. If they cannot auto-correct, then what I would say is they're stuck in a bad habit of movement. That's something worth working on with your clients for the sake of injury management, even just efficiency of movement and loading. And then the third thing, we've come up with the 7 screen trains. So 7 little biomechanical screening movements that become the training drill that then slowly improves that one of those 7 assessments. So talk, see, do. Obviously, if you email us, we can give you more information, all this sort of stuff. That is the essence of the injury prevention kit or the injury prevention system as a separate thing to, let's say, the Rehab Trainer model that we use. So it all fits in there beautifully.
Yeah, terrific. Yeah, what I'll do is I'll pop my email in a moment, and then anyone who wishes to get a little bit more information on that talk, see, do, and that little tool, if you like, or we'll send that across to them to give you some content. We've got plenty of content for you to consume. So just a thing on the program and how we break it down. It's really important to understand the system is we first teach the movement preparation recovery system. So Tim early on in the conversation talked about a system around warm-up, and we teach the RAMP protocol. RAMP stands for raise, activate, mobilize, and potentiate. And so we use a lot of different strategies, whether that be body weight, whether that be strength power bands, mini bands, anything like that, to kind of create a meaningful progressive warm-up that utilizes these different strategies, but has a system. So that system can be applied within the general pops or the athletic realm, which it actually came from Dr. Ian Jeffries, actually, from the FIFA program that he was part of back in the UK. So that's where that sort of stems from. And we have a whole system that builds out and from that. And then the recovery side of things is very important as well, as Tim alluded to, recovery post-session, but recovery as standalone sessions to create more of an undulating and somewhat progressive linear programming for your clients, because you can't always work in the fourth, fifth gear. You're going to have tissue damage. You're going to have also psychological damage from overtraining. All of those things we need to mitigate by including recovery as well. So there's lots of different strategies that we teach in and around recovery, both hands-on and hands-off. And as Ulrik has been mentioning, it's about empowering the clients, isn't it, Ulrik? It's about making them more aware and empowering them. So it's not always hands-on. They're not always switched off. They actually need to be aware and switched on, and to be able to take this away and do their own work, as well as be guided by you as a coach. That's sort of how the first pillars work in the system. And then furthermore, Ulrik talked about the talk, see, do within the assessment protocol. We thoroughly go through those in our different ways of modes of teaching. So we do primarily virtual for global or self-paced, where Tim, Ulrik, any one of our faculty members will be delivering live sessions through Zoom to get this information knowledge across. In Australia, we have in the East Coast, Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, we do a blended, but our online is really immersed in videos and the system itself that you dive into, not only on your own, but with the support of us and others. So do you want to talk a little bit more about the corrective approach, Tim? So some of the correctives we teach for the upper limb, lower limb, and spine, and sort of talk about how you integrate that within groups, but also for one-on-one clients as examples.
Yeah, okay. So one-on-one obviously does work this easier because it's, I guess, more tailored to that person, and you got the time and attention to that person. But I don't think that's where the industry is heading. It's definitely more semi-private, it's group stuff, and that can get a bit challenging. And something I got for myself that I took really away from this sort of program is, it says in the title, the systems. So not only do we teach, I guess, the knowledge, the tools, and the modalities of it, but as you're learning the know-how, this is also how you apply it immediately. And it sort of comes down to what I mentioned before. It really gives you that, how can I blend it into the exercises that they think they need to do to achieve what they need? If you explain that correctly, these corrective systems can be quite easily, I guess, injected into your programs quite subtly and have a really big effect to it. But it just gives us a good, I guess, library of either knowledge and tools that we can either pre-plan or implement on the spot as we see it, to really make people feel more comfortable moving. Okay, we all know people in the Gen Pop have these common postural deviations, these common movement dysfunctions, or lost movements, or movements they've never even been able to achieve before. And it's just ways that we can put it in, and they feel like they're getting the attention, and it's also driving towards their like. So it goes head to toe, really. Corrective exercises for all, right from whether they need mobility. Okay, maybe that mobility is in the way of a stability issue. So you have great stability drills for each one of those joints. And then ways we can sort of blend that into, you know, if we talk something about the lower trap, how we can blend that into the actual exercise that they like. So I think it's a really great way to, I guess, put it in really subtly. I'm all about the subtlety because I'm a high performer. I like performing more than the nitty gritty little stuff. And if this just gives me the tools and guidance to get people to that high performance, that's fantastic for me.
Yeah, it's a great example of what Ulrik was talking about earlier, somewhat the personalities and then sort of tempering that with the why, by giving them the reason as to why they need to pursue that, and then providing the modalities, the framework, i.e. engaging activities to make it sort of attractive enough for them to kind of stay the course and improve along the way. Because it's those micro improvements, the micro coaching, that really makes the difference, doesn't it, Tim and Ulrik? I think, you know, it's easy to assume, you know, you look at someone and on face value, you go, oh, that's they're not going to engage in that. So what Tim is saying here is that the strategies that we provide are really fundamental, and then they're the building blocks for you to be able to take it to groups, to the elderly, if you will, to any sort of special populations as well, all within scope of practice as well. That's one thing I wanted to sort of add here is all of our programs are accredited with American College of Exercise, NASM, AusActive as well, and Myotherapy Australia as well. So
something I want to add into that is, I guess the end result is in a group setting. I mean, for my system, and I know linking it back to when I was a one-on PT, it really reduced the cancellations. Okay. There was no more. I woke up with a really stiff back. I don't feel comfortable coming to the gym today, or I've had a hard day at the office and my neck shoulder thing's been playing up. It gives the end user, our clients and our members, the confidence in us, and knowing that even if I'm not feeling top notch and 100% ready to exercise, I know when I come to the gym, Tim and his coaches are well equipped to deal whatever entry point that I'm coming into. So if people do wake up really stiff in the back, and it does take some people, you know, 10 minutes to get up out of bed, they're not going to cancel. And that for them is incredible, because they've come from gyms where if they've woken up on the back, I can't go to the gym today. And that just flows, I can't get to the gym. That flows on through the rest of their day. They go to work, didn't make it to the gym, and then that carries on. They get home and they still feel the same. And then the likelihood they're going to wake up with a stiffer back because of that stress and that mood they're in is probably more again. Yeah. Okay, so I really think that is probably the best endpoints to what we do here, is the confidence and comfortability of exercise, the comfortable exercising.
Switching now into the other component, which all of this is interwoven, but it's modularized. How we teach is this injury prevention system. So that's where sort of Ulrik really comes into this and focuses on the more sort of trickier components, in a sense of that it's quite a lot deeper. So we sort of go in these layers within the MRC. So Ulrik, do you want to talk just a bit of an overview on this component and what is covered and why you cover it?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of a surprise how deep we do go into the muscle imbalance theory and into the corrections of muscle imbalance in the last part of the movement restoration coach. But it makes sense, because as you said, we're layering it, and then we're asking you to keep learning, keep growing, and then even take it that next level where if you can get a reasonable sense of that, you really are fortified and you're ready to deal with a whole raft of different niggling, annoying, frustrating problems that clients will bring to you. You will be more effective if you go right through to the end of the MRC and complete the 3 days of face-to-face, which is taught by myself, or a couple of my colleagues, Wayne Rogers, or Chris Malik, or Mark Davis, or James McEwen. There's a number of us physiotherapists around Australia who teach the last 3 days, or who teach the virtual. Well, I teach the virtual. So if you're doing pure MRC virtual, you'll be with me for those 3 big days spread over a period of time to really consolidate, go a bit deeper, and then you just feel so ready for a whole raft of little things that clients will bring. So we certainly encourage you to go right to the end, even though there can be some exhaustion because it's a big learning project. Do it finish it, and you will not regret the effort you put in and the investment, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And we call it a journey. So this is around a 4-month program. There's also a self-paced option so that you absorb, so that you learn, you embody, and then you transfer all of that knowledge that you've learned throughout from great educators like Tim, Ulrik, Kim, or any number of our faculty. The other thing that we do use is we augment the journey with technology. So we have a great learning management system platform, as well as what's called the GoX Pro app, which is a learning app, first and foremost. So we have all of the 7 screens and the correctives, a number of those correctives for the upper limb, lower limb, and spine. And so there's the community piece where you can talk to other students, engage. And so, the idea is to be collaborative, to enjoy learning, and to be engaged with it. So that is the whole movement journey, the whole sort of story, if you like, of the movement restoration coach, and why we feel that this is it's life-changing in that, and I'll go back to what Tim mentioned, there's business strategies within this, there's retention, there's confidence that you will gain as well to kind of tackle, if you will, in a nice way, the nagging injuries that can waylay your business, yeah? So all of a sudden you have to farm them out. And, where's the solution there? So the idea is that there are solutions within scope of practice, because that's why we work with Ulrik and his team as sports physios, that we have a scope of practice and we're not just sort of denying that, there's a denial there. Really, really awesome. So Ulrik, any final thoughts from you first, and then Tim?
Ooh, that's a great final thoughts. I'm very content that I just love the fact that you keep evolving it, Tarek. You're not just kind of settling back on your laurels with the MRC, but it just keeps kind of growing, developing. There's new educators who come in different ways. There's new tech. It just keeps getting improved. The whole process feels more solid and more manageable for a student now. And it's just a learning process for us as well as educators, for you as the designer of it. And it's exciting to be a part of something that's growing and evolving. So it'll be better next year. It's better this time than it was last time. It's just getting better. So it's great stuff. It's
always evolving. Yeah. And we're doing this together to bring the best education to the market, right? And this is global. So this is for everyone, right, out there. Tim, any final thoughts from you, mate, for the listeners?
Yeah, I guess so. So I guess observing the industry for as long as I have, and being able to travel around with the company, presenting this course, looking at different gyms, talking to a lot of coaches, I definitely think this style of training or this chapter of being a coach is definitely the missing link. I think a lot of the time it's lacking. We're very performance driven, body composition driven, and when someone gets injured, it's just like, oh, bad luck, there's a physio. But there's so much we can do as a strength conditioning coach that can prevent people going to the physio, or even have a better relationship with the physio when they're coming out of the physio. That I think it'll really help people drive towards that high performance that our industry, the fitness industry, is really driven towards the last decade or so. Getting people lifting heavier, moving faster, whatever they're doing. I definitely think there's a lot more complexity in what we're coaching people doing. And I definitely think implementing the knowledge and skills from a very systemized and easy to approach course like this will be a game changer. We'll definitely see a lot of improvements in coaching, as well as the end user, the athlete, the gen pop. We're going to see a lot more healthier, athletic people for a lot longer. That's definitely the missing link in what we need to do.
Yeah, totally agree there, Tim. And guys, if you want a copy of a portion of the book that Ulrik's written on the injury prevention system, as well as a free little series, if you haven't done the MRC or been exposed, please email me. So I've got it here, Tarek at functionaltraininginstitute.com. You can also follow Rehab Trainer, Ulrik Larsen. Not sure what the handle is there, Ulrik, just Rehab Trainer.
The _rehab_trainer.
Okay, great. And then at FTI Global. So for those of you who sort of don't know much about us, so I can provide you guys with a number of useful resources. to learn more about it and get some really strategies that you can apply right away. This was more about informing you of not just about the program, so I hope that's been achieved, but also the philosophical underpinnings, the importance of a system, as Tim mentioned just then, and the importance of really engaging your clients with this really important stuff, you know, whether it relates to them. So Tim talked about right at the beginning is understanding their goals. And once you connect them to their desired outcome, right, and this is all a movement journey, movement's medicine, but it's also a language, the universal language, right? And that's the cool thing here is how you then communicate this to your clients to make it engaging and not just a matter of compliance. And then there's the collaborative effort, right? Ulrik and I have been collaborating for a number of years. Tim's given examples of how he collaborates in his local community with other professionals, with allied health. And that's the game here in a sense, guys. It's really about that and really understanding where you fit and being comfortable and confident with that. And you're going to be able to retain clients, but also draw in new clientele, you know, and this is one system. So look, everyone, really appreciate those who stayed the course. We had 16 of you that I hope you didn't just listen, but you really sort of soaked it in and have absorbed and understood these concepts at one level. We want you to go into a deeper level of knowing and understanding what we do. So to that end, do reach out to me, Tarek at functionaltraininginstitute.com. I'll be just throwing you some resources that could be useful for you. So we hope that you've enjoyed this. Thank you, Ulrik and Tim, for your amazing input as well. So yeah, we'll be seeing you around, guys. And for those of you as well, we do have a group called the Functional Fitness Concepts free group. Tim contributes to it. Ulrik occasionally as well. Ulrik, you have a group too. You have the Rehab Vault.
Club Rehab, yeah.
Rehab.
Yep.
You also get access to that for several months for free when you join the MRC. So there's plenty of content that we freely give, and we do have an amazing community. So thank you everyone for staying the course, and we'll wish you the best.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks everyone.